Montana, 1884. The fence fell on a Monday. Not dramatically, not all at once, not with any warning that would have given Maggie Cole time to prepare. Just the south section of the corral, which had been weakening since the previous autumn and had finally decided that Monday morning was the appropriate moment to surrender, taking with it 4 fence posts and 30 feet of wire. She stood in the yard in her work boots, with her coffee going cold in her hand, and looked at the fallen fence and the 3 cows already investigating the gap with the enthusiasm of animals who have been waiting for exactly this opportunity. She did not panic. She was 38 years old, and she had been managing alone for 14 months, and panicking had not been available to her as a response since approximately the 2nd week after Robert left. She put the coffee down. She opened the barn and drove the cows in, all 3 of them, which took longer than it should have because one had opinions about the direction of travel. She latched the barn. Then she went to get the fence tools. She was halfway to the shed when she heard from the other side of the property line a voice she had not heard before. "That's a 2-person job." She turned around. A man was leaning on the fence post of the neighboring property, the one that had sat empty for 2 years and had apparently sold last week. He was not offering to help. He was stating a fact. He said it the way you say something true that the other person already knows, without softening it, without making it into a question. Standing beside him, ears forward, watching Maggie with the attention of a horse that has already made a decision, was the most beautiful and clearly most difficult animal she had seen in a long time. "I know," she said. "The tools are in the shed." He looked at her for a moment. Then he climbed through the fence line without asking permission. "James Porter," he said. "I moved in 3 days ago." "Maggie Cole," she said. "That's my fence." "I know," he said. He picked up the post driver and got to work. The horse watched all of this from the other side of the fence with the expression of an animal attending something he considers important. James Porter had been a sheriff in Texas for 11 years. He did not talk about why he wasn't anymore. What Maggie learned from Martha at the general store was that he had come from Abilene, paid cash for the Henderson farm next door, and arrived with 2 horses, a wagon of tools, and the kind of heavy silence that settles over a man who has been running his whole life and has abruptly decided to plant his feet. He was 42 years old, but his eyes carried 10 years more of dust and something he hadn't yet put down. He was not an easy man. He did not fill silences with pleasantries. He said what was true and left out what wasn't necessary. 3 days after fixing her fence, he came back to check the post anchoring on the east side, which he had mentioned needed attention, without announcing he was coming and without expecting thanks. Maggie found this either annoying or refreshing, and had not yet decided which. The horse was named Ranger. Ranger was a 3-year-old bay with a white left foreleg and the temperament of an animal that had formed strong opinions about most of humanity and was selective about exceptions. He had come from a rancher outside Abilene who had been unable to manage him. James could manage him, barely, with the patience of a man who understood difficult things and did not take them personally. Ranger did not like most people. He tolerated James. On the morning of the fence repair, Ranger had walked directly to the fence line and stood watching Maggie work with an attention James had not seen from him before. When Maggie reached over the fence without thinking and ran her hand along the horse's neck, Ranger went completely still, not with tension, but with the stillness of receiving something unexpected. James had watched this from the other side of the corral and had not said a word about it, but he thought about it for the rest of the day, and the day after. They fixed the fence in 2 hours. Not quickly, correctly. The posts set at the right depth for the Montana soil, the wire tensioned properly, the whole section built to last through what Montana winters were going to do to it. James worked without narrating his own competence. She worked without needing explanation. The fence went up. At the end, she made coffee and they sat on the porch, him on the step, not presuming the chair, and drank it in the quiet that doesn't need filling. "The east corner post," he said, "the one nearest the barn. The base is soft. You'll want to reset it before the ground freezes." "I know," she said. "I've been watching it." He nodded. He drank his coffee. "The Henderson place," she said. "You bought it sight unseen?" "I saw it once," he said. "Rode through 2 years ago on other business. Remembered the land." "What made you leave Texas?" He looked at the mountains for a moment. "My wife died 2 years ago," he said. "Ruth. Carriage accident while I was out on a circuit. I wasn't there." He said it plainly, the way he said everything, without performance, without asking for anything in return. Staying in Texas felt wrong, like standing in a room where all the air had been used. "I'm sorry," she said. "Thank you," he said. He stood up and set the cup on the porch rail. "I'll look at that east corner post before I go." "You don't have to," she said. "I know," he said. And he went anyway. Maggie sat on the porch and watched him and thought, this man is going to be either a very good neighbor or a very complicated one. She had a feeling there was no difference. The complication was Ranger. Specifically, the fact that Ranger, who tolerated James with the resigned acceptance of an animal that has decided one human is sufficient, had apparently decided that Maggie Cole was also necessary. This became clear on the third morning after the fence repair, when Maggie came out to do her chores and found the bay horse standing at the shared fence line watching her property with the patient attention of an animal who has somewhere to be and is waiting for permission to go there. James appeared 20 minutes later. "He got out of the pasture," he said. "How?" Maggie said. "He opened the latch," James said. "He knows how to open latches. He doesn't usually bother." Maggie looked at Ranger. Ranger looked at Maggie. "He's been standing here for 20 minutes, she said. James looked at his horse. His horse did not look back at him. "I'll get a different latch," James said. He got a different latch. Ranger opened that one too, on the 4th morning, the 5th, and the 6th, at which point James stood at the fence line with the look of a man who has stopped calling something a coincidence. "He's never done this before," James said. "He seems very certain about it," Maggie said. Ranger had by this point walked through the open gate, crossed the property line, and was standing beside Maggie with the composure of an animal who has arrived where he intended to be. James looked at his horse. His horse was looking at Maggie. "I'll build a better latch," James said. "Don't," Maggie said. She was slightly surprised to hear herself say it. She put her hand on Ranger's neck, and the horse went still. "He's not bothering me," she said. "He's going to eat your feed," James said. "I'll account for it," she said. James looked at her. He looked at his horse. He looked at her again. Something shifted in his face. Not a smile, exactly, but the place a smile comes from. "All right," he said. He walked back to his property. Ranger did not follow him. Maggie stood in the Montana morning with a horse that belonged to her neighbor and thought, well, this has gotten complicated. And somewhere in the back of her mind, very quietly, she thought, I don't mind. September arrived, and Maggie had been managing the numbers since July. Robert had left her the farm, generous in principle, complicated in practice. The farm came with 210 acres, 60 head of cattle, a workable operation, and a debt of $180 to Caleb Marsh, who ran the lending operation out of the back of his dry goods store. Marsh had told her in July that he would need payment by the 1st of December. December was 14 weeks away. The autumn cattle sale was in 4 weeks, late October, the standard timing for the Montana market. If she moved 40 head at fair market rate, she would cover the debt with $30 remaining. If the prices dropped, and they had been dropping, the local market flooded by ranchers selling off drought-weakened stock, she would be short. The problem was not the arithmetic. The arithmetic was clear. The problem was that the local market in Cedar Creek fed into buyers who set prices together, and those prices had been falling since August, and she had no access to anything outside that pool. She had not told anyone. James found out on a Tuesday, not because she told him, because he had been to Marsh's store for supplies, and Marsh had mentioned it with the casual indiscretion of a man who considers other people's finances community information. James came back past her fence line on his way home and stopped. "Marsh told me about the note," he said. She looked at him. He had no right to do that. No, James agreed. He didn't. He rested his arms on the fence rail. "The 1883 Northern Pacific Line came through the state last year," he said. "Changed the market completely. I have a contact, an agent for the railway. They're buying cattle for the work camps and for Eastern shipment. The prices don't follow the local pool. They're better, significantly." She studied him. "I'm not asking for charity," she said. "I know," he said. "This is business. My cattle go in the same sale. Better prices help both of us." She looked at him for a long moment. There was something she needed to say before she accepted this, something she had been carrying since Robert left and that she needed him to understand. "James," she said, "I have been managing this farm alone for 14 months. I know what I'm doing. I just don't have your contacts." "I know that," he said. He held her eyes without flinching. "I'm not offering to rescue you. I'm offering what I have. The same as you'd do if the situation were reversed." She looked at the mountains, then back at him. "All right," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. He went back to his property. Ranger, who had been standing beside Maggie throughout the entire conversation, watched him go, and then looked back at Maggie with the expression of an animal who considers this settled. She was inclined to agree. "Before we go on, I want to ask you something different today. Most of you listening right now are somewhere in the middle of something. Maybe you're driving, maybe you're cooking or folding laundry, or sitting on a porch watching the evening come in. That's what Forever on the Frontier is for. If this story is keeping you company today, leave a like. It means more than you know. And tell me in the comments, what are you doing right now while you listen? I genuinely want to know. Now let's get back, because the cattle drive to Billings is about to run into something nobody planned for. They drove the cattle to Billings together. James had 30 head going the same direction on the same day, and combining the drive meant 2 people managing 90 head instead of 1 managing 60. The difference between manageable and exhausting. They left before sunrise on a Wednesday, with Pete from the feed store riding along as the third hand. The first day went well. The second day did not. The storm came out of the northwest in the early afternoon. The kind of October storm that Montana produces without warning, dropping the temperature 15 degrees in an hour and bringing the kind of wind that makes cattle nervous. They were 12 miles from Billings when the sky changed. "We push through," James said. "We stop now, we lose a day, and the weather gets worse." Maggie had already read the herd. 3 of the lead cattle were shifting, the first sign before a stampede, a subtle restlessness that moved through a herd like a current. She saw it. She did not think James had. "The lead 3, she said. "They're going to bolt left if the wind picks up." James looked at the cattle. He looked at the sky. He looked at her. "Ride with Pete to the rear," he said. "Keep them together from behind. I'll handle the front." "The front needs 2, she said. "Maggie, I can see what's coming and I know this herd," she said. "You don't." He looked at her for a moment, the gray eyes reading something in her face, something he was working through in real time. She could see it. Whatever it was, it cost him something to move past it. "All right," he said. They split. She took the left front, he took the right. When the wind hit hard 20 minutes later and the lead cattle surged, she was already moving, cutting the angle before the bolt could develop. Her horse working the terrain the way you work it when you know what you're doing. James held the right. Pete held the rear. They lost no cattle. The storm passed them 30 minutes later, the herd intact, Billings visible in the gray distance ahead. James pulled alongside her on the trail. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, "How long have you known this herd?" 3 years, she said. "Robert bought them the spring before he left." He nodded slowly. "You were right," he said, "about the front." "I know," she said. He looked at her sideways. The corner of his mouth moved, the almost smile, the one she had been cataloging since October.
"You've been right about most things," he said. "Yes," she said, "I have." They rode the last 12 miles into Billings in the gray afternoon light, and neither of them said anything else, and neither of them needed to.
The railway agent's name was Henderson, a precise man who knew what he needed and paid accordingly. The Northern Pacific had extended its line through Montana the previous year, and the camps along the route needed beef, and the eastern markets beyond were hungry for Montana cattle that had grazed on genuine range grass rather than the overgrazed southern land. Henderson paid prices the local Cedar Creek buyers could not match, and did not try to.
He took 40 of her cattle at a price that covered the debt with $48 remaining. Walking out of the sale yard, Maggie stopped on the Billings Street for a moment. $180, gone. The winter was hers. She had driven the cattle through a Montana storm and negotiated with a railway agent, and the farm was still standing, and the numbers were clear, and everything was going to be all right.
She stood there for a moment, and let that be true. James came out of the sale office behind her. He did not say anything. He stood beside her on the street and looked at Billings doing what Billings did in October, busy and loud and entirely indifferent to the fact that a woman had just saved her farm. "James," she said. He said. "Thank you," she said, "for the contact." "The cattle were good," he said. "Anderson paid for what he got." "I know," she said. "Thank you anyway." He looked at her. Not the sideways look from the trail, the direct one, the one she had been receiving since the fence repair and had never gotten used to. "You handled the front of that herd," he said, "in a Montana storm, alone." "You were on the right," she said. "I know where I was," he said. "I also know what I almost did." She waited. "I almost told you to go to the rear because I wanted to keep you away from the dangerous part," he said. "That's not..." He stopped. "Ruth," he said. "When she died, I wasn't there, and I have been trying to fix that ever since in ways that don't make sense." He looked at his boots. "You're not someone who needs to be kept away from anything." She looked at this man, who had taken the midnight calving check and brought her $48 of breathing room, and had just said the most honest thing she had heard from another person in a very long time. "No," she said. "I'm not." He nodded once. "I'm learning that," he said. They walked back to where the horses were tied. Ranger turned his head toward Maggie before she reached him, the way he always did. She put her hand on his neck. James watched this and said nothing. The Montana afternoon held all three of them in the particular quiet of something that has been building for a long time and has finally arrived at the place it was going. March arrived, and with it, the calving season. The correct time for it in Montana, the spring thaw beginning, the worst cold breaking, the nights still hard, but the days carrying warmth. Maggie had 12 cows due. The previous year, she had lost 2 calves to cold and exhaustion, the kind of loss that comes from trying to be in 2 places at once with only 1 pair of hands. James appeared at her fence line on the first morning of March. "Calving?" he said. "Starting," she said. He looked at the barn. "I'll take the midnight check. You take the early morning." She looked at him. "James," she said. "I know," he said. Before she could say she wasn't asking for rescue. "Equal split. You know the herd better, so you take the hours when reading the animals matters most. I take the hours that are just cold and dark." He said it practically, the way he said everything practical. "That's not charity," That's division of labor. She looked at him for a moment. Midnight check, she said. Don't wake me unless something needs 2 people. Agreed, he said. The third night was the worst. The temperature dropped hard after midnight, and the wind came off the mountains the way Montana wind comes in March, without announcement. At 2 in the morning, James found a first calf heifer in the south corner of the barn, exhausted, the calf positioned wrong. He came for Maggie. Not because he couldn't manage it alone, because she had told him to. And because she knew this animal, and he didn't. And because he had learned, on a trail outside Billings in October, what it cost to make decisions for people who didn't need them made. She came in from the cold and read the situation in one look, and dropped to her knees in the straw without a word. His shoulder against hers in the narrow space, her knowledge, his strength, both of them working in the rhythm that 2 people find when they have been working alongside each other long enough. When the calf came, sliding into the straw and immediately lifting its head with the indignant energy of the newly born, Maggie sat back against the barn wall and laughed. The kind of laugh that arrives when something hard has ended well. James sat beside her in the straw. The heifer was already cleaning the calf. The barn was warm. Outside, the Montana wind was doing what it did, but in here, everything was exactly as it should be. His arm was against hers. Neither of them moved away from it. Ranger, in the far stall, turned his head and looked at them with the expression of an animal who has been watching a situation develop for 5 months and finds the current arrangement satisfactory. "James," Maggie said. He said. "What did you decide?" she said. He turned and looked at her. She looked back in the lantern light. "About what?" he said. "About whether coming to Montana was putting something down or picking something up." He was quiet for a moment. The calf made a sound. The heifer answered. "Both," he said. "I think it was both." She held his eyes. "Yes," she said. "I think so too." He reached over in the straw and took her hand. She held it. Outside the Montana wind, inside the warm barn. 2 people who had both come from somewhere hard, arriving at the same place. He said it on a Saturday in April, not during a repair, on the porch in the early morning before the day's work, with the Montana spring visible in the mountains, and rangers standing in the yard between their properties, not tied, not pastured, just present. Having decided the property line was a suggestion that didn't apply to him. "I want to say something," James said. "All right," she said. He looked at his coffee. He looked at her. "I came to Montana to stop being the person I was in Texas," he said. Not because that person was bad, because he had run out of reasons. He looked at the mountains. "I didn't expect to find reasons here." Maggie waited. "A horse that opens latches decided where he lived," he said. "And I found that I didn't want to stop him." He set down his coffee cup. "Maggie, I'm not an easy man. I don't talk enough, and I help without asking, and I have a horse with no respect for property lines." He looked at her directly. "But I would like to court you, properly, if you're willing." She looked at this man, who had fixed her fence and taken the midnight calving check, and let her ride the left front of a spooked herd in a storm, and said the most honest thing she'd heard from another person in 2 years. "James Porter," she said, "you have been courting me since October." He looked at her. "I wasn't sure you knew," he said. "I knew," she said. "Since when?" he said. She looked at Ranger in the yard. "Since he stopped opening your latches," she said. "When did he stop?" James said. "The 3rd week," she said. "He decided he lived here. He stopped needing to escape." James looked at his horse. His horse looked at Maggie. "All right," James said quietly. "Then I'm asking properly." "Yes," she said, simply. The way she said everything that mattered. They were married on a Saturday in June, in the Cedar Creek Church, with the Montana summer outside and the whole town present, because the whole town had been watching since October, and nobody was going to miss it. Martha Greer was in the front row with the satisfaction of a woman whose conclusions have been confirmed. Maggie wore a blue dress. James wore something nice, with the slight discomfort of a man more at ease in work clothes who was willing to be temporarily uncomfortable for important occasions. He stood at the altar and watched her walk toward him, and thought about a Monday morning fence repair and a horse that had walked through a gate and not looked back. She walked toward him and thought about a trail outside Billings in an October storm, and a man who had said, "I'm learning that," and meant it. The vows were simple. Neither of them needed elaborate. Outside the church afterward, Ranger was tied to the post where James had put him that morning. When Maggie came through the doors, Ranger turned his head toward her, the way he always turned, and she went to him and put her hand on his neck, and he went still, in the way he had gone still since the very first morning. James came and stood beside her. "Your horse," she said. "Our horse," he said. She looked at Ranger, then at James. Then she smiled, the real one. He put his arm around her in the June sun. Martha Greer, 3 steps behind them, said quietly to Reverend Cole, "I knew it in October." Reverend Cole said, "We all knew it in October, Martha." "Yes," Martha said, "but I knew it first." They joined the properties that summer, 370 acres combined, the fence line between their holdings redrawn not as a boundary, but as a working lane between the 2 barns and the 2 sets of pastures that were now one operation with 2 complementary pieces. James's railway contacts opened markets they hadn't had access to before. Henderson's Northern Pacific connection had been the first, and it became a regular arrangement, the ranch sending cattle east on the new line at prices the local Cedar Creek pool could not touch. Maggie's 14 years of Montana land knowledge meant they planted the right things and lost nothing to the conditions that defeated less experienced operations. By the second year, the operation was running at a profit that made Caleb Marsh's $180, the debt that had felt so heavy through the summer, seem like what it actually was. A small thing, long since gone, that had led indirectly to everything good that came after. The south fence of the original corral stood straight. The east corner post held through 2 winters without complaint. Ranger continued to live wherever he decided to live. On an evening in their second summer, sitting on the porch in the Montana long light, James said, "The north section of the shared fence, 3rd post from the east end." "What about it?" Maggie said. "I set it 2 degrees off," he said, "in March. I've been waiting to see if you'd notice." She looked at him. "I noticed in April," she said. He looked at her. "You didn't say anything," he said. "I was waiting to see if you'd admit it," she said. He held her gaze. Then the almost smile arrived. The full one this time. The one that changed everything about his face. The one she had been watching for since October. "Saturday," he said. "We'll fix it Saturday." "Yes," she said. "We will." He took her hand in the Montana evening. Ranger lifted his head from the yard and looked at them. The mountains went from gold to amber to the deep blue of a sky that has never needed permission to be beautiful. And everything, the land and the cattle and the fences standing straight and the man beside her, was exactly and completely right. A fence fell on a Monday morning. Maggie drove the cows into the barn, picked up the tools, and went to fix it. And a man appeared on the other side of the property line and said, "That's a 2-person job." He was right, not just about the fence. There's a thing that happens when you've been managing alone long enough. You get very good at it, and being very good at it becomes its own kind of wall. You stop noticing what it costs. You stop thinking about the midnight calving check, and the cattle drive, and the barn roof, and all the things that are harder than they need to be, because there's only one pair of hands. James Porter came to Montana to put something down. What he found was that putting something down and picking something up can happen in the same moment, at a fence line, on a Monday morning, with a horse that had already made up his mind. He didn't arrive with a solution. He arrived with a post driver and an opinion about fence post angles and a horse with no respect for property lines. And Maggie didn't need to be saved. She needed someone who knew the difference between helping and rescuing, and who had learned on a cattle trail outside Billings in an October storm which one she was asking for. That kind of love doesn't announce itself. It just shows up on Monday morning and gets to work. May God bless each and every one of you who listened today. Until next time, keep riding.